working on it. Steve and I are up here as authors of this presentation, but Jeff Tyson's been very instrumental in producing a lot of this as well. This is one of the major topics that we cover in the Habitat Task Group report, which is available if you contact a task group member. The executive summary is out on the table as well. Why are we looking at priority management areas? Well, the Council of Lake Committees developed these environmental principles, and with the premise that to have sustainable fisheries can occur if we have protected our functional habitats or improve them through a systematic, adaptive, and cumulative collaborative approach that accommodates the fisheries values and in decisions that we can act on manageable anthropogenic stresses. So things that we can actually take action on and not things that are out of our control. There we go. So taking that, this is kind of the main charge for the Habitat Task Group, and developing these list of these functional habitats as in the impediments that are associated with those, and focusing on the species, identifying the fish community goals and objectives. Like Eric said, those are the previous ones, not the ones that Todd Wills talked about this morning. We'll use that to identify where we have priority management areas that support the Lakes Area Management Plan, the LEC environmental objectives, as well as the fish community goals and objectives as we continue to move forward. And we'll also take that list and be able to develop the strategic research directions for the Lake Erie environmental objectives, and then document key habitat and research projects as they relate to those priority management areas. So what am I talking about for functional habitats? Hypothetically, where we see fish, habitats that are required for various life stages of the different species for, things like, I'll use the green one, walleye, whitefish, sturgeon in the Detroit River. These are all habitats that these fish species require at maybe all life stages or various life stages. And so theoretically, we can look at that and develop these priority management areas that give us kind of a little more specific locations to focus in on. So a lot of this information was presented last year, and it was more of the proof of concept of what we were trying to do. And so this year, I'm going to kind of breeze through this, the methods a little bit, how we got there a little faster, so I can share some more results with you this year. But the Habitat Task Group kind of facilitated with the help of all the other task groups for Lake Erie, looking at the various life stages. I am not coordinated with two hands, but various life stages, from egg all the way through adults and spawning. What are the critical components that are affecting those life stages? What are the impediments for those critical components? And then what actions can we take to remediate those impediments? And then once we had that very large list that we've now compiled for that, we've also queried the Lake Erie Committee to develop some prioritization criteria, and also using some of the information from the Council Lake Committee. And using that prioritization, we're able to apply it to that list and then calculate action scores, and as well as taking those action scores then to develop where those calculate the priority management area scores and identify what are our kind of rankings for priority management areas. And so what we've been able to do is we began this in 2016. We were able to complete the earlier portions of this by 2017, and we really made a push to try to get a completed product. And by completed, this is a work in progress. So these things change as habitat projects are done, different priorities are done. And this is all kind of working towards a tool that can be used that doesn't necessarily take into account policy, but it does take into account the biology and information from a lot of people. And throughout this project, we also incorporate a lot of the uncertainties that are there. So hopefully nobody's really surprised with some of these results, but we understand this is a work in progress, and we're going to continue to chip away at it. But so prioritizing this, with the CLC kind of portion of this is, protection is greater than restoration, which is greater than enhancement. So we kind of incorporate that into how we came to the scoring, focusing on manageable outcomes, manageable projects. And then, like I said, we did consider the uncertainty, and some of this is based on, by considering the uncertainty, we took into account if this is published peer-reviewed information that we're utilizing to identify the stresses or functional habitats, all the way down to professional opinion by biologists around the lake. And then continuing with that, collecting some information for the priority numbers. We, like I said, queried the LEC, asked them, what areas of the lake are important? Are they all equal? Are some more important? And you can see, the Lake Erie as well as Lake St. Clair are kind of the top priorities, and the St. Clair River, Detroit River, Niagara River, still high priorities, but slightly below those. So those areas will score out a little bit differently. We did a similar thing with species identified. And I know that's really tough to see, but it's just a list of species that we've identified from the fish community goals and objectives, and did the same thing and kind of gave them $100. How would you spend that? And are all species created equally, or do we have priorities? And as you might expect, walleye and yellow perch come out as the top priority species, and some of our forage species like gizzard shad, they're kind of lower, and that's reflected in the scoring as well. So just to make sure we captured what was meant by some of these scorings, we did ask some additional questions, like how the habitat project should be prioritized based on the species they benefit, and LEC agreed with that. And should the habitat projects that benefit multiple species take priority over projects that benefit only a single species? And there was a lot of discussions on that, and it kind of depends. If it's for species that maybe some of the forage species that didn't rank out as high, as opposed to a number of like 5 of those species compared to a project that was focusing on yellow perch and walleye. Well, that yellow perch and walleye would probably be should be a higher priority. So we tried to capture that, and that's kind of our interpretation, is that the benefits benefits to the highly desired species should take priority, and the multi-species benefits do not necessarily take priority over the desired species. So kind of putting this into an equation that we can apply to this large group of data that we came together, we put it into this kind of equation where taking the species that are identified, the area, and those prioritizations that we got from the LEC, as well as the project type from the COC. Is it to protect? Is it to restore? Or is it to enhance? As well as what certainty levels we have. If it's really low certainty, then that should be reflected in the score as well. And then we brought in the time to implement. So kind of share that if you can't see that, but so like I said, just kind of walk through this, bringing those numbers into the species in the area, protection, restoration, enhancement, and but for time to implement, if we were able to get to this in the next 5 years, then that one should be brought up a little, should be ranked a little higher, as opposed to something that's going to take us 20 years to get implemented. And so we again applied this to this large, what we have dubbed as the monster of a database, and we were able to take that and get to some, able to determine the scores for the functional habitats. I think I missed one here. No. Take those action scores and then sum all of those up based on we would sum everything up for the Detroit River, and then that would allow us to create a rank for that area, for given all of the actionable items that are there, and allowing us to determine the priority management areas. So here's now getting to some results. We have, you can see we put ranks in this table here, but these are pretty much the actual score that we created from the table, and then the percentile. Well, understanding how this data was collected, we kind of categorized this a little further down, where all 10 of these are identified as very high priority management areas. So they're all kind of grouped together, even though we do have a rank here. But we're able to break things down by region. We have the functional habitat type, a variety of different types, and then where applicable, we would have an actual place. So sometimes we do have like generic open water pelagic is a high priority area, a very high priority area for based off of the information from our work here. And but one thing I'd like to point out as well is the Maumee River and the Sandusky River do score very high and come out as our two top ones, and you're going to hear projects from those two systems here coming up after lunch. So we can take these priority management areas and look at the very high and the high level areas and kind of put these on a map and see where they're at and see where they're located. You know, I know some people look at the Eastern Basin and say there's nothing there, but there is. It's just near, you know, that near shore area is a very high spot for the Eastern Basin. But you see there's a lot in the Western Basin, a good amount of like near shore, as well as some of the tributaries in the Central Basin, you know, all the way through to the St. Clair River. So and we have these places now in that this is going to be able to be used as a really good tool to help steer where projects are being done, or you know, and this does not take into account policy. This is just from the biology and from our understanding of the functional habitats for the fish species that we have already talked about. So with those, inside of those priority management areas, we have all these actions that we summed up already, and so we can take those actions and what are the, you know, apply some scoring to those as well, and come up with the top 5 actions. And you know, just putting this kind of up there as an example of this is information that we can use as part of this tool that we can provide to the LEC to help make some decisions as we go. You know, so like maintaining nursery in the Maumee River, improving the watershed management, protecting some spawning grounds, and then often we have some unknowns and knowledge gaps. So identifying areas and impediments and things like that would need some additional research. That was a critical part as well. So to kind of sum the results of our table up, we identified 116 functional habitats. 28 of those were identified as very high and high. That's what I showed you in that map. Out of those very high and high priorities, we had 102 actions that we could identify. And you know, some of those were, you know, less than half were research. Here at 40. There we go. And then you know, we had 62 management actions, and those actions range from very regional in nature, like nutrient inputs into the system, to site-specific, like the removal of Ballville Dam, which you'll hear about later. And then we're also using these results to help inform the LAMP process, as previously talked about. Looking at, you know, regional nutrient reduction strategies. Two focal areas that came out of that are the Maumee River and the Thames River, which will impact about 8 different functional habitats. And then increased connectivity of select tributaries, and through this we can identify some of the top priority areas that would impact production of fish in Lake Erie, the Black River, Wingford Dam, Huron River, Flat Rock Dam, as well as the Grand River as in the Dunville Dam. Ballville Dam's not on here because you'll hear about that in a little bit. That is no longer on there. And also increase the shoreline and near-shore complexity in areas like Sandusky Bay, the Huron Erie Corridor, the Grand River in Ohio, and the St. Clair River Delta. So where we're moving forward with this, as I run out of time, is we're going to continue to refine this list and work to identify some of the knowledge gaps and linking that back in some of the research needs and linking that back to the priority management areas as we have determined. And then as we report out projects, which we do as the Habitat Task Group, we're going to link those back to these priority management areas as well. And then a big effort we're going to put in this upcoming year, and hopefully as we continue, is to turn this from this big, large, unwieldy table into a geospatial format, which will be easier for us to input data, as well as be a much better tool on the back end for the LEC to use, as well as stakeholders. And so kind of think that geospatial map, but something that's functional, you could sort and do a lot of different things with. And like I said before, this is a large effort led by the Habitat Task Group, and these are the members. And if you'd like more information on this, contact one of these members, or The report will be up on the GLFC website as well. And with that, I'm done.